What's up, guys, and welcome back to another Wuthering Waves video. And I need to tell something. I need to share something. I gotta shout it from the rooftops because I gotta say, I did not see this coming. Guys, the Wuthering Waves story is awesome. I know I'm gonna do a little bit of glazing here, but don't worry, I'm gonna be fair and I'm gonna give criticism where criticism is due in this case. But I have finally just finished the full 1.0 story of Wuthering Waves, and that's what we're going to focus on here for the context of this video. We're not talking about character quests. They're their own little micro experiences, but now we're going to talk about the 1.0 story quest of Wuthering Waves. And guys, I can't help but thinking, why would Wuthering Waves choose to unfold their story in this way? There are some absolutely fantastic moments that come out of this story, but it is plagued by these insane pacing issues. What do I mean? A lot of people in their first impressions for the game talked a lot about the first half of the story leading up to Scar, and there is a metric ton of yapping that takes place. A lot of exposition, a lot of tell, don't show, which is a big taboo in stories, in my opinion. If there is something that you can show in the story, you should show that, you should not tell it. And there's an example of that where Wuthering Waves uses that well. I'm going to try and avoid any major spoilers in this story for at least in the second half. I will be alluding to some things that are floating around. I'll try not to over spoil it, so those of you who have not had an opportunity to complete the story, you can still enjoy and listen along for what I'm about to talk about. Now, if you completed the first half of the story, you know there is a portion where you helped Jianshin go off into the Norfall Barrens, just the earlier parts of it, so that you can help her find a soldier who's supposed to come back to the main city. As you complete that portion of it, you get to adventure with her for a little bit. You get to do a sequence where you play as Ji-Yan, and it's a perfect example of the rover is having this narrative flashback of a particular character and what's been going on, and instead of just saying, I had a flashback about this thing, we actually get to go in and play as Ji-Yan and do a boss fight as Ji-Yan in that case. It's a great example of show, don't tell. But there are so many other points, especially early on in the research lab, which I still have a gripe about, where it's just yapping and yapping and yapping. And they did help that a little bit with some small breakup sequences with some trial combat and Dreamless that made it a little bit nicer, still a lot of yapping. It was a lot worse before they added in that little Dreamless sequence in that first part, but it's still really slow. And I know part of that is a consequence of it's a new world, new terms, new things that you need to learn. So they're doing a lot of world building in that first part, but it's a lot of slow world building, and it's kind of plagued a little bit by slow speaking characters. Maybe this is like some zoomer brain creeping in. I'm not a zoomer, but I feel like I'm starting to get zoomer brain, where sometimes characters don't talk fast enough. And I'm convinced that is true because Alto, for example, talks at a great speed when you do get to talk to Alto, but then Yang Yang, I feel like, talks at 0.5 speed sometimes, and it is really hard. While the VA is doing a good job mostly on a lot of the lines, this pace at which she is speaking is like so hard sometimes. I'm just glad there's not a character like Paimon who's coming in for double speed, because if we had to do the 0.5 speed of Yang Yang and then have a double speed character to go over it again, I would shoot myself. That would absolutely destroy the story for me. But fortunately, we don't have that, so we were able to get through that first part. But around chapter 4, which a lot of people have been talking about, is where you encounter Scar, which is what we knew up to from the CBT2. It's pretty slow, but Scar is a turning point in the story. When you encounter Scar, you start to get some more complex storytelling. You start to learn more of the backstory of these characters, and it's told in a way that invokes a feeling of mystery and curiosity. So you're actually searching for answers as you're going through that story, and they do an excellent job of leading you in with that. And then that's where the story starts to turn. Once you finish that sequence with Scar, you go into chapter 5, which again has a little bit of a slow start into chapter 5, especially after you kind of get stuck at a union level gap there. You finish chapter 4 at about union level 15. You don't get chapter 5 until union level 21. So there is a bit of a gap in time too if you're not grinding super hard like I did. But there's a bit of a slow upstart in chapter 5, but then very quickly into chapter 5, things take a turn. More intrigue is dropped. New characters are introduced that make you way more excited for doing that. Now I'm gonna have a small spoiler sequence here. I'll have a little timer so you know when it's there if you do want to skip over it. So I'm gonna have a spoilers in 3, 2, 1. Okay, let's talk about it. The part when Camilla comes in is awesome. Camilla very quickly became one of my new favorite characters, and there was a great excitement there where I thought she was aligned with the Fraxidus, but turns out she's part of the Black Shores, and all of a sudden I got way more interested in the story. Is it because there was a hot anime character on screen? That could very well be the case. That 100% could be the case, but it was still great regardless. And from there, it only got better. We got to see Alto brought back into the story. We got to see Encore brought into the story. And then we got to go into this major war sequence, which was just phenomenal. I absolutely loved it. Coming out of the spoiler section here, the 5th and 6th chapters just ramp up significantly. But I will say, as much as I loved those sequences, some of the stuff happens way too quickly, where all of a sudden, like a light switch, things just turn and now everything is starting to go wrong. And I think there could have been a little more of a buildup around those things. I know that sounds funny talking about the first half of the story, but it seems like it's like slow, boom, all of a sudden everything happens. And maybe there was more drips and more things that I didn't notice in the story. I feel like I've got pretty good story comprehension ability in that, but it did still feel like a really rapid acceleration in the story. But regardless, I still loved it. The way that they told the story, the way that it unfolded, the opportunities they give you trial characters for characters that are key in the story during that time. So if you don't have those 5-star characters that you get to do trials with, you still get to have the full experience. And guys, it is just legitimately awesome. Because again, well, yes, is it the best narrative ever told? Is it the best narrative game ever told? No, of course not. Again, we're always trying to keep things in scope here. This is a free gacha game that if you wanted to, you could play and not spend an absolute dollar. And I would say that if you spent $0 on this game and you played through, got characters you liked, and got to this point in the story, it would be 100% worth it. It honestly would. And a lot of people are going to say like, wow, look at Connor's big Kuro dick rider at this point. But I'm telling you, when I finished chapter 5 and 6, I was like legitimately hyped and excited. Like I was legitimately hyped. I was so hyped and so fired up that on stream, I went around and just decided to kill every single boss in the map because I was like, I want to keep fighting. I want to keep this combat going. This is great. I'm stoked. That's literally what it pushed me into doing. Now, this part may be a small spoiler for some, but I don't think it is because it's already started to circulate. But as a consequence of this story, we see that Rover finally gets their second form as well, and you finally get access to, spoilers, a Havoc Rover. And that is so cool. The Havoc Rover is like twice as cool as the Spectro Rover when you unlock them. They've got these great combinations that happens. It's a fully new kit. It's not just an elemental swap. The combat animations change, the skill changes, as well as the forte for the character changes as well. It's like almost having a completely new character, but the skin looks the same, but you get this cool black wing that comes out of it as well. That is just absolutely phenomenal. And going through the story and what happens in the story actually made me like the main character. Guys, I played a gacha game where the main character I actually thought was super cool and I want to use the main character. That's quality in a story. That's not trying to rip you off because it's like, okay, well, here's the main character because you need a character to play. They're like, hey, here's a main character that actually is pretty cool. And if you wanted to like invest in, it's worth it. They're a strong character and narratively they're cool. They're not like this useless character, but they're also not so powerful that it's like an isekai power fantasy. It's like perfectly balanced where with this amnesia trope that they're bringing in there too, as you're slowly unfolding their story, it actually is done in such a good way that I honestly think it has pushed gacha gaming storytelling to another tier. And I hope that kind of like we saw with PGR, where the early stages of the story were slow and then all of a sudden it accelerated and got amazing, that I am excited for the future main story beats that are to come. And I really, really, really hope that Kuro continues to execute on that regularly. And then we're not going to be sitting here for 6 months before we've got the main story being progressed a little bit more forward, guys. I would absolutely love to see what happens next. They give us a little bit of an epilogue at the end that is a little bit slow for me, and I didn't totally love how that unfolded, but I also appreciated that it wasn't, again, 45 minutes of yapping about like, wow, everything's great now. So I definitely appreciated that they did that at that point in the story too. But let me know what you think in the comments down below. Let me know what you think of the story. Do you think that Wuthering Waves actually has done a good job with its story so far? Do you think I'm glazing way too hard and it was actually pretty mid, which if you're halfway through the story, I totally understand? Or do you think, yeah, actually, you know what? Those last couple chapters, that really turned it around for me. It wasn't just a 1-minute cinematic. It was legitimately, 2.5 story chapters that were actually pretty cool. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Thank you so much for watching. You make sure to catch the streams live at twitch.tv/ConnorsThoughts. Make sure to drop a like and subscribe on the channel here today. Thank you to the patrons and the stream subs who have been supporting me and what I can do here on this channel. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.